These are the titles I will be spoiling. Put this video in watch later and see the ones you want to before proceeding. Most of them are good. You can pretty much understand the video without having seen them, but it's still best otherwise. If it's not mentioned here but I still start talking about it, don't worry, I won't spoil it. I would like to delve right into the discussions of Lovecraftian horror and how it has all been adapted into film just as much as you do. However, in order to understand Lovecraft and his brand of cosmic horror to the best of our ability, we first need to briefly go over his life's history so we can gain a better context on how and what inspired the unique and unsettling stories he wrote. Don't worry, his life is kind of a horror story of its own. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born in Providence, Rhode Island in the year 1890. His father got admitted to a psychiatric hospital when Lovecraft was only 3 years old and died in there 5 years later of syphilis. His mother, stricken with grief, never let Howard out of her sight and spoiled him any chance she got. They also lived with Lovecraft's 2 aunts, grandmother and grandfather, who Lovecraft was especially fond of. They would send each other letters often when the old man was traveling. By the age 3, Lovecraft was already proficient at reading and writing. His grandfather encouraged him to have an appreciation of literature, and later even educated him both in the classics and also the weirder tales. His grandmother, on the other hand, was not close to him, but her death in 96 is said to have changed the family forever. According to Lovecraft, it never felt the same afterwards. It's around that time when he started having his nightmares. Nightmares about night gaunts, who he says whirl me through space at a sickening rate of speed, the while fretting and impaling me with their detestable tridents. 30 years later, night gaunts would appear in his stories. He had a Christian upbringing, but when told that Santa Claus doesn't exist at 5 years old, he recalls retorting with, "God is not equally a myth?" A couple years later, he would start taking interest in the hard sciences, including astronomy, chemistry, and some biology, before reading about the specifics of human reproduction anyway, which he says turned him off. Astronomy, on the other hand, was his favorite, and it began to influence his worldview a lot, and the school years he missed out on due to unknown health conditions were made up for with home tutors. His grandfather's business, though, began dwindling soon, and his largest venture suffered a catastrophic failure, followed by his death mere months later in 1904. Lovecraft and his mother were then forced to move into a small duplex. He says the only reason he didn't commit suicide at that time was his interest in the sciences. Howard tried going to school, but was at times removed for what he terms as near breakdowns. He says he was prone to intense headaches, insomnia, and just general nervous weakness, which prevented his long-term application to anything. Otherwise, excluding conflicts with the teachers, he enjoyed learning, until another breakdown right before his graduation, though this one is said to have been of more severe nature. He never returned to school after, even though he was planning to attend Brown University. In 1916, he started publishing his first stories, with Dagon being the third, definitely one of my favorites. 2 years later, he tried enlisting in the army during World War I. Although he did pass the physical exam, he also felt the need to state, "My mother has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army," before doing so. He then tried to join the Rhode Island National Guard, but once again failed as his mother used her family connections to prevent it. In the winter of 1918, she also suffered a nervous breakdown and went to live with her sister. In an interview 30 years later, her neighbor recalls Howard's mom Susie describing weird and fantastical creatures that rushed out from behind buildings and from corners at dark. She even says they met one day with Susie excited and apparently not knowing where she was. In 1919, she was committed to the same hospital as her husband, where her son visited her often, but he also became more outgoing not long after. It was a year later that he started publishing his earlier Cthulhu Mythos stories. In the future, they will be categorized as and spawn a whole new subgenre called Lovecraftian or Cosmic Horror, which I'll be using interchangeably. His mother died a year later from complications with a gallbladder surgery. Lovecraft was deeply shaken. He says that he once again had no reason to live, but continued with his endeavors despite, and eventually met his future wife Sonia Green. His aunts disapproved of the relationship, but they got married in 1924 nonetheless, and moved to her apartment in Brooklyn. Lovecraft wasn't her first husband, and she had to take initiative a lot in the relationship, which was likely due to his mother's upbringing. Sonia truly wanted him to succeed. She decided to move to Cleveland when a job opportunity arose though. After failing, she returned, with Howard trying his best to support her, but struggling to do so due to his lack of real work experience. He tried to publish his stories, but the Weird Tales magazine editor rejected most of them, probably because Lovecraft criticized a lot of his writing back when he wasn't editor yet. Sonia became ill for a while, but continued traveling after she recovered. At one point, Lovecraft's small apartment got completely ransacked, leaving him with only the clothes he was wearing. His wife sent him a weekly allowance, but after some time he decided to return to Providence, Rhode Island to live with his aunts. He did find a home of his own soon after though. This is the time period within which he wrote most of his more famous stories. Along with some other men, Lovecraft formed the Lovecraft Circle, a group of like-minded friends and writers which he encouraged to share stories, knowledge, and help each other. Sadly, his work still earned him close to no money. He was incredibly sensitive to criticism and sometimes even refused to sell stories to his own accord. Him and his wife eventually agreed to divorce, although for some weird reason, Lovecraft didn't sign the final decree. His wife never actually found out and even married someone else after some time. Lovecraft's health started deteriorating, and due to his fear of doctors, he only went to one and got diagnosed with terminal cancer of the small intestine just 1 month before it killed him at the age of 46. You would expect such a miserable man to be a bleeding heart, but no. You see, H.P. Lovecraft wears his xenophobia and, general hating of poor people on his sleeve. He despised democracy and preferred that aristocrats rule America, and he was very racist, not just to Jews or black people, but literally anyone who was not of specifically Anglo-Saxon descent. This seems to have stemmed more from culture, since he at one point advocated for including everyone who adapted his higher culture in the superior race. I mean, his wife was in fact Jewish, and so was one of his friends, Samuel Loveman. He still advocated for segregation though, but his views do seem to have become more moderate in his final years. He even supported ethnicities preserving their cultures, though still not infiltrating anybody else's, letting German people be German as fuck, letting Spanish people be Spanish as fuck, and so on. And after living in poverty for so long, he converted to socialism around the time of his last return to Providence. He advocated for government control over resource distribution, fewer working hours, a higher wage, unemployment insurance, and old age pensions. He even began opposing Hitler. Apparently, this is due to him finding out Jews were getting beaten in Germany. But most importantly, with his life's history in perspective, it becomes quite understandable why he wrote such nihilistic and unsettling books. The way I look at it, the philosophy of Lovecraft's short stories can be split into 3 separate aspects. Firstly, we have the fear of the unknown, our deep, unexplored ocean within which we keep discovering new species again and again every year, and very likely haven't found the deepest point of. Imagine swimming in it, what is essentially an abyss in which you cannot see whether the bottom is 4,000 meters away or 11,000. Scary, sure, but what if you discovered something that wasn't meant to be discovered? Something, or some being, that sank to the bottom thousands of years ago, now awoken. And on a bigger scale, the actual cosmos, an infinite, silent, and empty void. Or perhaps a whole another realm housing incomprehensible eldritch beings the size of galaxies. Coming across one of them, a being simply too different and unimaginable. This is the fear of the unknown, gazing at something that is beyond human comprehension, something that ought to not be gazed upon. And what happens when you try and understand it? You go mad. A classic trope in a majority of Lovecraft's stories. The character obtains the forbidden knowledge and either commits suicide not long after, or tries to tell other people, therefore ending up in a padded cell. I'm not going to try and armchair psychologist this one, but the fear of the unknown in his stories and many other tropes were likely somewhat influenced by his grandfather introducing him to weird fiction at a pretty young age. Oh, and definitely his political beliefs. The monstrous people of Innsmouth, for example, are a result of interbreeding of the human race and the race of the Deep Ones, and there are other instances of interbreeding going wrong. All of his protagonists seem to be rich white guys, whilst a lot of the unreliable, shady characters are non-white, poor, or both. He has a lot of random sus comments about race in general, much like Agatha Christie and other old-timey writers. And finally, some find it weird that Shub-Niggurath is the name of a terrible old god who's also called the Black Goat of the Wood with 1,000 Young. This is perhaps intended, perhaps not. It's most likely a derivative of the name Sheol-Nugganoth from Idle Days of the Yarn, a short story Lovecraft took inspiration from. Also, the word Negro just means black in many languages. I don't think a lot of people, or I hope not, get mad at a country being named Montenegro since it literally means Black Mountain. Although this does look a little more like the word, admittedly, so he might have still injected his racism into it. But I don't think it matters, honestly. If somebody were to call him out on it, he would probably say, yeah, it was intended, even if it wasn't. The man was obviously racist as fuck, even by the time standards, and it undoubtedly influenced his work. Of course, so did his own crippling fear of the ocean, and perhaps that of space. Ah yes, Lovecraft's three subtypes of fear of the unknown: fish, stars, and non-rich, non-white people. The madness, on the other hand, could have been related to both his parents ending up in a psychiatric hospital. Besides the unknown, we also have the existential dread. It's a little different and perhaps might strike a bit closer to home. The existential cosmic dread about the human race's place in the grand scheme of the cosmos. Its intent is to make you think about the simple laws of the universe you never question, the moral values that you so strongly adhere to, your own life's meaning. It makes you realize that you don't matter. Your life has no inherent purpose. There are possibly forces which are stronger than you out there, but they certainly wouldn't care for you if they even knew you existed. Of course, this is Lovecraft trying to show us his way of viewing the universe. He was incredibly nihilistic, just without the cool part of finding your own meaning in a world without an intrinsic one. At the very end of one of the many essays he wrote, Lovecraft states that all he desired was oblivion, whatever that means. These two main aspects of the unknown and the existential dread can be independent of each other, or even better, merged together to create a truly intense and unique experience. This is mostly what people refer to when they say Lovecraftian. Yes, Lovecraft wrote many stories of a more classical horror nature before, after, and in between his signature cosmic horror ones, but they aren't Lovecraftian in the way that we usually use the word. The movie Reanimator was adapted from Lovecraft's story Herbert West's Reanimator. It's a Lovecraftian story, but it isn't a Lovecraftian as in cosmic horror story. It's literally about reanimating people back to life, but with the twist of possibly terrible repercussions. It's a classic gross out film. Oh, and we actually have a third aspect, the odd one out, the aesthetic. The Lovecraftian aesthetic is a pretty cool one, whether it leans more towards his type of cosmic beings, the cults and the rituals, the secluded fishing towns, it doesn't matter. Even if a story doesn't try and capture neither the fear of the unknown nor the existential dread, it can still work in the aesthetic. Although I wouldn't necessarily call a story like that cosmic horror. It could simply be a mystery but with cult murders and rituals instead of normal killings. It can have the Necronomicon too, which, yes, does come from Lovecraft, and so does the name of the Arkham Asylum from the DC universe, curiously. Or what about The Host by the great Bong Joon-ho, or the not-so-great Cloverfield? Both of these monsters in these movies are Lovecraftian, but they are still just that, ordinary monsters. One is more of a small Dagon, whilst the other leans closer towards an even bigger than usual Cthulhu. Wait, what is this video about again? Oh yeah, we'll mostly be exploring how cosmic horror has been adapted into film up until now, the common mistakes that are made, how to do it properly, and simply examining the genre of Lovecraftian horror itself along the way. It is still a representation of my opinion, feel free to disagree with it. This discussion should be one of casual nature anyway. Also, video games are a whole another can of worms, for which I have some good but still different ideas. Although many of the visual discussions we'll be having here naturally apply to games as well, this is still about film. Now, is cosmic horror horror? Yes, of course, and a very effective one at that, which we're going to discuss later. As Lovecraft says in one of his most popular quotes, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. And, you know, existential dread is pretty unsettling too. However, there are some who just aren't affected by those things. Calling those people stupid or shallow would be stupid and shallow. Yet on the other hand, them calling cosmic horror not horror would be dumb too. We don't instantly remove the appropriate genres of a movie when it doesn't realize them, if it doesn't make us laugh or cry like it said it would, or make us excited and intrigued. Also, horror doesn't have to be so blatant. Many people's tastes have been diluted with jump scares and intense, scary music, but something like a still and quiet shot can be just as effective. But let's move on. Here's the point you've been waiting for. I don't think the portrayal of the visually incomprehensible creatures on film is as big a problem as most make it out to be. Lovecraft shouldn't be that impossible to adapt. Some seem to have the idea that it cannot be portrayed properly when it comes to movies at all, that books can do it best because they don't have to worry about the visual representation. I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding, or at least disagreement, on how and why this subgenre of horror disturbs and perhaps scares us, and what it actually is. First of all, you don't even need them in the story at all, but still, movies don't have to avoid these creatures altogether due to the visual limitations. They only have to avoid showing them fully, or at least their real form, while still making you wonder about it and perhaps describe them verbally the same way books do. And yet, a lot of movies fail at that. It does seem to be a problem. Are there not any good examples? Annihilation is a 2018 sci-fi horror movie. It didn't get the best reception out there. It's not a hidden gem, but neither did its box office cover the budget. That's understandable though. If you're looking for a good story for most of the film, it doesn't really have that. If you're looking for good characters, it, well, doesn't have that either. And if you're looking for a good semblance of common sense or logic within the plot, well, sorry, you will be disappointed. It's about some scientists that go into a dangerous zone that keeps spreading in order to find out how to make it stop. I guess they haven't thought of sending in unmanned vehicles yet, and when they do go in, it's without any protection, like they just touch things that could kill them. When they get attacked by an alligator and manage to dispose of it, they decide to go rafting through the same water immediately. Why? But you know what, I don't want to shit on this movie too much, it's not why we're here. If you're curious, I would give it my subjective score of a 7. I liked it a lot, but not for the majority of the movie. Most of it was okay. I would never call it a phenomenal experience as a whole, but in some ways, it is. Sure, the special effects and score are amazing and add a lot by themselves, but when seeing the approach that it took to cosmic horror in that one part of the movie, it's truly stunning. Stunning and terrifying. Annihilation is, without exaggeration, the most unnerving experience I think I've ever had with a fictional story. Of course, I've gotten used to it after rewatching my favorite scenes a billion times on YouTube, but nonetheless I won't forget how it made me feel the first time. Now, it wasn't as terrifying as you not subbing, ringing the bell, liking, commenting, sharing, or even watching my other videos, which take a lot of effort and time to make, but that's besides the point. Whether it's intentional or not, Annihilation is a great study of horror. In short, there are 3 major encounters throughout the whole movie: the alligator, the bear, and the alien. The alligator's appearance comes soon after our crew enters the mysterious zone around the start of the movie, and it makes it with a little jump scare.
It's been long abandoned, maybe even before. Radek?
You can barely even call it that, a scare. It's almost as if they made it thus on purpose, to show the audience just how feeble this approach can be at times. I think jump scares are fun, but never will they ever stick with you. Their horror fades so ridiculously quick that it's hard to even call it horror, it's simply a startle. There's a game I love called Layers of Fear that relies almost exclusively on jump scares, and whilst it's a great piece of art, if I find myself thinking about it late at night, all that comes to mind is how beautiful certain parts of it are, the visuals, the soundtrack, the story, instead of how scary it is. On the other hand, the second encounter in Annihilation is about halfway through the movie, with the bear. One of the characters suddenly gets dragged away during the night, only to be found later on, killed and dismantled. Weirdly enough, she then comes back at a rather awkward moment, as one of the girls has gone nuts and tied everyone else for supposedly murdering the missing one. This scene is, easy to say, way more unsettling than the last. Now we're dealing with a disturbing idea, a creature that you also don't wish to come across due to the fear of dying, but also because of uncanniness and confusion. The human brain doesn't just recognize threat, it also recognizes creepiness. Sure, a person with murderous intent cornering you during broad daylight with a gun is scary, but turn off the lights, place a scenario in your home and make them into a terrifyingly deformed monster that you only realize is staring at you as you turn off the TV, it peeking out the corner of the door which leads to your only exit. Now we have a recipe for terror. This isn't just a bear, it absorbs the state of souls in their last moments of demise, then makes use of them to lure in more prey with their cries for help. To picture yourself being a hair's length away, staring down a luckily blind monstrosity waiting for you to instinctively scream out so it can quickly, but not instantly or painlessly, kill you. Pretty scary, but what can be even more disturbing than that?
I thought I was a man.
The film's final sequence of Lena arriving at the lighthouse is when the cosmic horror comes in. For the majority of the movie, everything has had a pretty off, almost ugly color palette, but it's also very unique. It's disturbing in its tones. Nothing normal should look like this. It's too unnatural, too vibrant. We shouldn't have blues like this in nature. We shouldn't have icy towers on beaches. You can't show me a whole new color in a movie like H.P. Lovecraft speaks about in The Color Out of Space. But this gets surprisingly close to that feeling of unfamiliarity. Anyway, at the beginning of the movie, Lena got to reunite with her husband Kane, who was understandably broken by the zone and the horrors that reside within. Otherwise, he was still Kane. But now, Lena comes across a recording he left behind before embarking to escape the zone. He monologues, questioning his identity as a human and what makes him so. His choice of words is quite confusing at first, until this happens.
If you ever get out here, you find Lena. I will.
Kane then commits suicide, only for the identical clone to walk forward and stare dead center at the camera. The sudden realization that the mysterious corpse standing mere feet away from you is of somebody you know is truly terrifying. Afterwards, Lena finds the last remaining crew member besides her, who goes on to transform into something. What I'm about to say might sound hyperbolic, but surprisingly, this is the most terrifying moment I've ever seen in a movie. Have you ever wondered, what do aliens look like? It's an interesting question that, if approached with honesty, will leave you with more questions than answers, yet also less interested in finding out. It's scary. If aliens exist somewhere in the universe, chances are they are so unbelievably different that interacting with them will prove almost impossible. It's not a matter of differing languages or cultures. It's a matter of being on an entirely different state of existence. What clothes do they wear is not the right question to ask, but rather something more like, how do they engage with time or space? Imagine for a second that the concepts of sight, sensation, hearing, smell, taste, communication, and so on were completely foreign to you. If you know all of them, you can perhaps begin to slightly conceptualize what experiencing them for the first time would be like. But can you imagine another one? What if you were to come across an alien that possessed just as many concepts that are unknown to you as you possess that you never really think about? How would you interact with this being? All the alien is in this movie is a four-dimensional being trying to adapt to a three-dimensional world. Okay, this is gonna get a little complicated, but let's try. Do pay attention. The dimensions I'll be speaking of are spatial dimensions. It doesn't have anything to do with time, which is also known as a kind of dimension. Firstly, a zero-dimensional object is a dot. Not a drawing of a dot on paper, but a theoretical, pure dot. Try and think about all of this as theoretical, in fact. Anyway, if we connect the two dots, we get a one-dimensional line. Only one direction to go. Let's call it width, although it doesn't really matter. other. The difference between the first, second and third dimensions is rather arbitrary. It's simply a single direction to the one-dimensional being. Next, if we connect two of those, we get a square, width and height, or width and depth. Depends on if you want to jump like in a platformer game or move in circles like a top-down one. Finally, if we connect two squares, we arrive at the cube, our final point, 3 dimensions, width, height and depth. But there could be another one, right? Yes, if we take two cubes and connect them. Yeah, it doesn't really make much sense, I know. You might think that we should theoretically be able to construct a simulation of a 4D object because we construct 3D things on paper and screens all the time. The main reason as to why this isn't true is the fact that, in our case, we're observing a 2D plane from a depth that it doesn't have, still from a 3D existence. We are not in the screen or in the sheet of paper, we are the observer that's looking at it from 3D, from the depth direction. To the 2D creature, it doesn't make any sense at all. It walks around it and only sees the colors change. Even if it was slightly transparent, it still wouldn't work. But I want to visualize 4D. You know what, let's go all the way back, let's try a different method. A line has 2 dots, right? 2 zero-dimensional things to make a single one-dimensional object. A 2D square has 4 lines, and a 3D cube has 6 squares. So a 4D geometrical shape should have 8 cubes. Oh god, that's even worse. What would that even look like? Okay then, what is the form of the alien at least? Well, it's perhaps supposed to be a shadow. What does that mean? Let's start all over again. A one-dimensional object has a zero-dimensional shadow, and a two-dimensional object has a one-dimensional shadow. Well, technically, the one-dimensional line can have a line-shaped shadow and the square can have a square-shaped shadow, but that's, once again, only if you're observing it from a third dimension, if you shine light on it from a side that it doesn't have in its dimension, the height side of a line or the depth side of a square. If you exist on a line, you can only move forward, so the only shadow that you can have is one from behind or in front of you. Much the same, if you exist on a sheet of paper, you can only have light shown on you from a horizontal point, not from under or below you. So it still stands true, you get to have a shadow one dimension lower than the one you exist on. Anyway, a 3D object has a 2D one, as we all know, so a 4D one must have a 3D shadow. That's what the alien is. This shape is called a Mandel bulb, and it's supposed to be the shadow of a 4D object. You cannot go into a 2D dimension, only your shadow can. The same stands true for the 4-dimensional alien. Or if you don't want to use the word shadow, you could say the things the object is made up of instead. You know, dots for a line, lines for a square, squares for a cube. You still get the same thing. You could also just imagine looking at an object without moving. That way 3D becomes 2D, 2D 1D, etc. But perhaps it's not a shadow at all. Perhaps it is there somehow, if we accept that there could be zeroth dimensions in the first dimensions, and first dimensions in the second dimensions, and second dimensions in the third dimensions, then there must be third dimensions in the fourth dimension. And honestly, it makes a little more sense that way. If a 2D being goes into a first dimension, the creatures there see it moving sideways somehow, in and out of the dimension. It's warping, mind-breaking. And if it's us in 2D, it's the same, but up and down. We will also be able to see them all from above, without them seeing us. The alien in Annihilation is closing in on itself and then going out back to envelop the other part again and again and again, and that's its rotation. Unlike 2D objects, 3D ones can rotate in all 3 dimensions because they have them, so I guess this one can rotate inwards, that's its dimension. And that's as far as our brains can go, at least mine. I can't imagine more. This imaginary dimension, or I guess the idea of the shadow if you prefer that one, is the best we have, a way to kind of portray 4D in a movie shot in a 3D world put on a 2D screen. And you know what's even more unsettling? There technically could be even more dimensions. There might be an alien right now that's doing the same thing I'm doing, trying to comprehend 5D whilst also having trouble imagining what living in 3D would be like. It might be feeling sad for us due to the simplicity and pointlessness of our existence compared to the existence it has. Or I guess it probably can't feel sad, I don't know. This concept of extra dimensions is just too hard to wrap your head around. It's so different, it's, well, truly alien. So how does this alien conduct itself? What you just heard was not the soundtrack, that was the alien's perhaps speech, perhaps just passive sound it emits. As Lena gets closer to this thing, it absorbs a single cell from her body, and in mere seconds develops into a prototype of a human creature, immune to bullets, to any type of intimidation really. Yet even with a human structure, it fails to communicate the way we do. All it can do is this. So it takes to copying her, not mirroring, but an imperfect replication. It's only once Lena tries to hit it that it attacks back, likely not even able to comprehend what it's doing. It's not human, it doesn't think in good or bad, those are arbitrary human concepts. It just does. It doesn't even seem to be copying Lena's motions, but rather her mind. It manages to predict one of her movements before her brain has relayed the signal through her petty human nervous system. When she tries to get closer, it does too. Only when she tries to move away, it still follows. It doesn't let her go, it wants to understand. She manages to overcome her fear of the alien, however. Lena even touches it, letting it absorb even more of her, becoming a perfect replication now. Before killing it with a phosphorus grenade. It doesn't run away because it follows Lena's thoughts. When she moves forward, it thinks, I should move forward too. So when she thought I should kill the alien, it thinks exactly the same, and thus allows her. Unlike Lena, Kane didn't murder his clone. He got to know him and slowly realized just how frivolous the concept of being a human is. You are nothing more than about 6 octillion atoms in the shape of a human body, and whilst that is a lot, if each examined on their own, they are still atoms. Lena killing her copy, although it having a good cause, that of putting a stop to the aliens spreading the zone, remains just as much a murder as any other that's ever occurred on planet Earth. This clone was just as much a human as Lena was. Could it somehow be possible that you were created a mere 10 seconds ago and every single memory that you have got implanted into your head like with this clone? Yes, it would be impossible to know that reality because you are nothing more than a bunch of atoms. If the atoms are arranged like a human and they believe they are a human, they are that human. Truth is scary, and if one which we can figure out ourselves can prove to be so unsettling, then we cannot even imagine what those we should never be able to would be like. I used to think truth was in and of itself a positive thing, but I don't anymore. One thing I know for sure is that for myself, I'd always choose the ignorance of bliss over the despair of reality-shattering truth. Of course, I would never say the same when it comes to simpler earthly matters, some things such as acknowledging the facts of poverty, prejudice, and death. But that's it. Truth is only valuable insofar that it can be used to improve your and our human population's lives. We cannot fix problems if we don't acknowledge them in the first place. But if there is nothing to be gained but misery, I would choose the blue pill over the red 10 times out of 10. Annihilation is a movie that I would, without hesitation, call pure cosmic horror. I've never before felt such dread emanating from an alien creature, such fear of the unknown, and neither have I felt so insignificant and small. It didn't give me a full-on existential crisis though, since I've been reading Lovecraft stories for quite a while, and a lot of other works based on or inspired by him. I'm kind of desensitized to it by now. Or am I? This is something I actually recalled literally as I was writing the previous paragraph right now. I don't think I've ever had a real fear of death itself in my life. Of course, everyone is scared of the way they might die. What if it's a terrible disease, or an unlikely accident, or even murder? The fear of your own humanity is different though. Sometimes I'll recall it somehow and tell myself, damn, I'll die one day and there probably won't be anything afterwards. That sucks. And then I continue with whatever I'm doing. I mean, you have been dead already before you were born. Was that scary? No, it wasn't anything. It's one of those things that feels as if it should scare me a ton, but it's way too obvious and natural. But I did somehow, and in a very weird way, a couple of weeks or maybe even a month ago, I'm not sure. I remember I was walking home on a Sunday. There was almost nobody around. I don't know what I was thinking about, but it somehow led me to Annihilation. It hadn't been more than a week since I'd seen the movie, and so the very things that I would in the future talk about in this video kept popping back into my head. As I was walking, staring in that one specific spot on the ground I still remember right now, the thoughts led me to the idea of death. And for the first time, in a way that's very hard to explain, I felt dread. The only description of a feeling I've ever heard which comes close to it was that of a panic attack. Now, from what I understand, panic attacks are often hard to stop because they don't come from any specific point. It's not an object or person you can get away from, so I'm hesitating to call my experience that. But still, it was in the same way incredibly confusing because I'd never felt like that before. The word fear doesn't do it justice. It's not really an extreme version of the standard fear / sadness / emptiness usually experienced. It's just different. Dread is the perfect word, I think. It's not like I started rolling around on the ground or something, but if you'd actually looked at me for that brief, let's call it a minute for which it lasted before I composed myself, and maybe tried to ask me something, I think it would have been very apparent that something was wrong. But hey, at least that means the movie did its job pretty well, right? One of the other best depictions of cosmic horror in film is John Carpenter's 1982 movie The Thing. It's about a station on Antarctica near which an ancient being gets dug out of the ground by some Norwegian scientists, does something to all of them, which you might be able to guess later on, and escapes into the icy landscape. This likely alien creature can perfectly take on the form of any life form, as long as it has enough time. It works like a virus, multiplying itself. You can probably imagine what happens when it takes interest in our 12 characters' cozy research facility. This film does such a good job with cosmic horror, in part because it's already objectively one of the coolest movies ever made and you have no right to disagree with me, but also because it's so subtle about it. The main ideas are to show how isolation can affect the human mind, and how easily we can turn on our friends if the circumstances are stressful enough. Yet, once again, it's also in a way about exploring the true identity of a human and how to define it, how to determine who is human or not. It isn't really possible for the guys to find out unless they actually attack the suspect. But on the other hand, that feels more like a way to expand on the fear of the unknown. The alien takes on forms similar to those described by Lovecraft, deformed, unnatural masses comprised of many different familiar and unfamiliar parts alike. That makes it aesthetically Lovecraftian. But it can also mimic a human perfectly. I'm repeating it again, but it's such a disturbing thought. What does it want? How does it do this? Where did it come from? It's scary to be locked together with something that wants to murder you, but it's different when it's also something you don't even understand. Imagine if every single person around you had the potential to not be a person at all. Imagine staring down at someone who looks human, acts human, and has a sincere look in their eyes, but they're not. What are they then? What is it thinking? This goes on to kind of manifest in Lovecraft's classic madness. The Dr. Blair, for example, turns completely insane and tries to kill everybody else. If the characters had managed to somehow escape in the end and return to the real world, then who knows if they would be able to trust another person again. Will they try to kill someone because they're suspicious? Will they be put in a padded cell? Will anyone even believe them that the thing exists? There we go, that's a cool classic Lovecraftian spin you could pull on it for a future remake. John Carpenter's The Thing is what I would call subtle cosmic horror. It's definitely there, but you'll have to look into it a little more. By the way, you shouldn't see these questions of just how Lovecraftian is the movie as pointless and nitpicky. Yes, at the end of the day, if the movie is good, it's good. But in order to understand Lovecraftian horror, we need to, well, understand what it exactly is.
I mean, I've had a few dreams, but I don't think that makes me unfit to do this job.
Another great movie that I would call perhaps Lovecraftian, perhaps not, is Arrival, a 2016 sci-fi drama. It's a very interesting movie about a mysterious alien species which the humans call heptapods. They arrive on Earth with about a dozen spaceships scattered all throughout the land in seemingly random locations. The ships look weird. Our main protagonists are Louis the linguist and Ian the physicist, who must enter the spaceships to try and find out what the aliens want. As they do, gravity somehow shifts and they are able to ascend easily. When they arrive at the meeting place, they see this. Tentacled cosmic creatures, clearly very aesthetically Lovecraftian. However, when we try to teach them our language, it actually seems to work. Moreover, they do the same. We show them what our words mean and they give us their equivalent, again and again and again. They don't seem to be hostile and don't try and tell us why they're here or even ask us any questions themselves. There is a theory which Louis mentions at one point called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or the theory of linguistic relativity. It states that the language which you speak influences the way you think. For our characters, it manifests as simply dreaming in the language, at first. As they progress through their mission, however, and are eventually able to ask the heptapods what they want, they say,
Offer weapon.
Most people take it at face value, and things don't go very well. The camp near the spaceship is ordered to disengage immediately as we think about how to approach dealing with the aliens. Mere minutes before they leave, Louise gets a random urge to go back to the heptapods. A weird capsule drops down to take her, and she seems to have known about it somehow. This time she's on the other side of the class. She speaks with one of the aliens and eventually realizes that they want to give us, the humans, a weapon, or rather a tool, a gift, let's say. The gift of their language, which they are already in the process of giving us, and thus also their way of thinking, a non-linear one. The heptapod language cannot be read from beginning to end, you see. That's not how their minds work. When they start writing a sentence, they already know exactly how it will be structured and how much space it will take up. It's like writing a paragraph with two hands, starting at the beginning with one and the end with the other. For them, even time is non-linear. They exist at every point in time simultaneously and can visit all of it by simply recalling. When Louise gets the gift, she can now see her whole future as well. In fact, there were a lot of flash forwards throughout the whole movie as she studied the language. We just thought they were flashbacks up until now.
I don't understand. Who is this child?
The show is called Mommy and Daddy Talk to Animals.
She also literally goes on to, and bear with me, call General Shang and tell him a secret only he knows, which he later brings up in the future and actually tells it to her for the first time, making her the first person to know it, which was what first made her able to tell it to him in the first place. And yeah, she literally exists at all points in time. There is no forward and back. Things just are and always have been. Our language, our way of functioning to which we're used to, literally dictates how we perceive things, and if you're exposed to that different way of perception, it may completely alter your mind forever. The forbidden knowledge, the breaking of human concepts, cosmic horror. You might have heard of a certain thing called psychedelics. Now, I may or may not know what taking psychedelics is like, but it's said that they can, among other things, make you realize just how much your senses filter your experience with reality. You might imagine that the distortion of time during the period of peaking on psychedelics is very literal, like slowing down a video by 20%. But no, it's more subtle than that. If you actually play a song, it all sounds normal, well, at least when it comes to tempo anyway, and yet it takes an eternity to only realize that you're still on the first 20-second verse. It's the last 5 minutes of class all over again, just on steroids. Take this one fact we all know for sure. Color doesn't actually exist and is in fact created in the mind. But what are the things we don't know that also deviate from how the universe truly is? What does the world look like through the eyes of a neutral observer, one who is able to see everything as it truly is? Is that even possible? Perhaps not, since perception is all, well, a matter of perception. But then, what even is a thing, as weird as that sounds? What is a thing when it isn't being observed by anything? Just how much that we think is objective to the world is in fact simply how we see things. Does our science make sure we can one day determine all of that? Or does it just help us to a degree? Unlike Story of Your Life, the novella by Ted Chiang on which it was based, the movie rejects determinism and opts for the existence of free will instead. Unless you are spiritual, believe in God, or something along those lines, the way we understand physics today makes free will impossible. Everything has a cause and effect, and you have no divine right to choose how the universe operates. If a rock cannot choose how it rolls down a hill, then what exactly makes you think you can choose anything? I know it sounds weird, but it's what science says. Sure, you are a living being, but you cannot point to anything in your brain granting you that choice. The burden of proof is on you to demonstrate it. Something like kicking a football can, in theory, be predicted perfectly, and you can know exactly where it will end up. That's a simple action, but even if we were to make an action like that as complex as possible, say having some sort of man-made course for the ball to roll around in, and make it last for years, with trees and rocks and rivers for it to float in, and some machine things scattered around to fling it away when it gets too close, and wind to push it if it stops moving. No matter how complex we make this stupid course, at no point does it become so complex that it starts making decisions. It can only get so complicated that it starts to seem as if it's too much so to be measured, and thus the illusion of free will is born. Now, some might say that things can't be predicted perfectly, since there might always be some amount of quantum randomness involved, but that still doesn't grant you free will, it's just randomness, not choice. You are human, but also a slave to the universe's grand yet meaningless scheme, wherein something was bound to happen, not because of a special destiny, but simply due to something else occurring before it, which was in turn a result of another thing happening before that, which also was... yeah. Arrival's choosing a free will really confused me, not because I'm a determinist, since non-factual ideas can still make for great, sometimes more interesting than real-life stories, but because it just doesn't make any sense. How can you know your future if you continuously change it again and again with each passing day? Louise can see the future of her child and even her death, but she can choose not to have her. Does she see every single child she could possibly have from that point in time and every single different life the child can have depending on her decisions? It might seem as if they're going for determinism at first, but the creators of the movie say otherwise. Louise herself even asks Ian whether he would change his future if he knew it all. The creators wanted to go for free will so that Louise's choice to have her daughter Hannah actually mattered. She knew she would die of cancer, but did it anyway. It shows that she sees the gift of life as so amazing that on its own it outweighs its guaranteed ending in suffering. In the book, on the other hand, Hannah dies of a preventable rock climbing accident. This is used to emphasize determinism to the reader even more, since Louise knew this but didn't have the power to stop it. She didn't have the free will. It was all cause and effect, Louise's own choices which slowly encouraged Hannah to become a rock climber. The heptapods, on the other hand, are said to be similar but have an overarching purpose in mind. The ones we meet in the movie had to come to Earth so they could deliver the gift of the language to the humans, and so we could, in their words, help them with it in 3000 years. One of them even knew it was going to die by doing so, but still came. They have the ability to choose a purpose, which then goes on to still determine their decisions. That's how I understand it anyway. Now, you could say we have a little oversight here, a detail which wasn't mentioned. How does the revelation of the future not change Louise's decisions? How does this cause not have the effect of her not having the child, or at least not encouraging her to rock climb? According to Louise in the book, she was still born with the mind of a human, so the most she is able to be is a hybrid of human and heptapod consciousness. She does, however, claim that she still has moments which are purely heptapod-like. So I guess in those instances the heptapod's non-deterministic existence just has no way of interacting with our deterministic one. Even though she knows the future, it doesn't change anything. That's still a guess though. On another note, something that counts for both the book and the movie, Why don't the heptapods start thinking linearly? If we go circular mode with their language, then shouldn't it be the same with them? I mean, they can understand it, it's proven in the movie. The same isn't shown in the book, but we have no reason to believe otherwise. Still, at the end of the day, the book was more Lovecraftian to me than the movie, simply due to the exclusion of free will. Yet on the other hand, it doesn't have the aliens show up at our front door, but instead send us some objects similar to flat-screen TVs, and we basically have Skype calls with them, which does work against the cosmic horror in a way. But the aliens aren't terrifying for most of the movie either, past the first meeting, and both stories make us think of our own existence instead, not even in a necessarily unsettling, existential dread type of way, at least not intentionally. I did mention something existentially terrifying earlier with the forbidden knowledge, but I kind of feel like I'm reaching a little with that one. It's almost as if I'm looking for it because I know others call it cosmic horror. But whatever, both the movie and the book are largely about linguistics anyway. As a whole, I would call it an almost Lovecraftian movie. It feels like it should be there, yet they're not even remotely going for it. The story is kind of bittersweet in some moments rather than unsettling. It's in a way hopeful rather than despair-inducing, and it's at certain parts definitely sad rather than terrifying. They present the forbidden knowledge of circular time, definitely one of the most effective and disturbing Lovecraftian-esque ones I've ever seen, and yet they never portrayed as such. By the way, I definitely didn't steal the almost Lovecraftian title from a Punk Rider article. Although I prefer the book over the movie, both are definitely worth to experience. Yes, there's some cosmic horror for the Lovecraft fanboys, but it's also so interesting just how cool they managed to make the academic study of linguistics. I can honestly listen to it and learn about it for hours when it's presented in a fictional format like this. There was some more of it in the book though. That's natural since it could have derailed the story very easily in the movie. The book just has the ability to do infinitely more internal dialogue. The movie could have possibly had more exposition, but it handled it very safely, all in one short sequence which was presented as a documentary. As Denis Villeneuve, the screenwriter, said, "We don't want to have a 40-minute TED Talk." It also cut off most of the physics discussions, which the book has a bunch of as well, and the novella was obviously able to tell the flash forwards in future tense, which I can imagine is very weird yet intriguing if you're experiencing the story for the first time. And there are other differences. Ian is called Gary and isn't an asshole in the beginning, though doesn't have much personality as a whole either, to be honest. The mind-blowing General Shang moment isn't there, and there is no cute parrot that's used as a possible sacrifice so they could test whether the air in the ship is dangerous and when the oxygen runs out. That's largely everything, but most of the things that were cut from the book just couldn't not be lost during translation. Something you should definitely be careful of when browsing the deep recesses of the internet's best cosmic horror videos and posts is the Lovecraftian Circlejerk. It's a relatively common phenomenon wherein every Lovecraft fanboy claims literally anything that isn't standard horror is cosmic horror, likely due to their long and tiring deprivation of actual, good cosmic horror in film. Chances are that if you go to a top cosmic horror movies YouTube video, you're going to see at least a couple movies that have nothing to do with cosmic horror at all. Yeah, in reality, it's not an extremely narrow genre, and a lot of stories involving aliens, death, and anything that causes existential dread at all, such as isolation, can be called cosmic horror. But at that point, every other movie becomes Lovecraftian and the word starts to lose its meaning. It's kind of an I know it when I see it type of thing. And I would still call a thing that fails at realizing the feelings of cosmic horror, cosmic horror. The Lighthouse is a very good example of a movie that I've seen labeled Lovecraftian for no sound reason. I've actually watched it a total of 6 times. Yes, it is one of my favorite movies ever, possibly even my favorite. Go watch it right now, or else. I love this movie, but it isn't cosmic horror. It's simply about 2 guys locked together in a terrible and boring lighthouse, trying to remain sane. I would compare it to a movie like The Shining, where the characters slowly go mad due to their unusual claustrophobic circumstances and possibly paranormal buildings, before I would call it Lovecraftian. Even Robert Eggers himself, who's the director and writer of the movie, alongside with his brother, says he gets irritated when people call it that. Another example can be Kairo. not the Americanized 2006 version, but the original frankly great 2001 Korean ghost film. It deals with the issues of loneliness, depression, and the decline of face-to-face social interaction as computers become more available. It's a movie that can give you an existential crisis for sure, but in no way is it because of the insignificance of humanity. Not all existential dread is Lovecraftian, and neither are all portrayals of madness. Of course, there are many other non-Lovecraftian movies people say are Lovecraftian. Cabin in the Woods is one, where the old ones are mentioned as a joke more than anything, and could be replaced with other things that suit the plot just as well. Also, The Mist, Alien, Get Out, Overlord, Midsommar, or even the damn Shining. There's a different type of Lovecraftian circlejerk though, one that declares every cosmic horror story that doesn't make any sense or seems like it's complicated very profound. There's just something annoying about people praising a movie like the short film The Sky, which actually amounts to absolutely nothing interesting other than scary darkness in the sky and things get distorted. I guess them taking mushrooms and then the mom texting her immediately was a very effective panic moment, but that's it really. It's not profound. If you think it's anything special, then you're probably a caveman who's never watched any actual movie outside amateur YouTube short films. Here's a point a lot of people seem to miss. Cosmic horror is not having no idea what you just watched, because at that point, as long as I have the resources, I can make the most random and thus effective cosmic horror plotline you've ever seen. Oh wait, that's what this movie is. The Sky is something you could call abstract cosmic horror. Sure, it doesn't have any real deep meaning, but can that still work? Can that still impose the dread we love so much? Yes it can. I will be honest, after first seeing this scene in 2001 A Space Odyssey, I was both confused because I had almost no idea what any of it meant, and also deeply unsettled. It's very hard to put into words just how much this one long sequence resembles the calming yet disturbing atmosphere of Lovecraft stories. A nightmare with a slow, dreamy pace. I think the best and frankly weirdest way to describe reading one of the better Lovecraft stories is your eyes hurting in a good way. It's insane the way Stanley Kubrick makes us stare at the screen, unable to look away for 15 minutes. Cosmic horror can work in the abstract, but man does it take a lot of skill to pull off. The safest bet for even a great artist, I think, is to have the source of cosmic dread be a clearly identifiable idea or object. And if it is abstract, accept that, instead of calling it profound and acting like it has some amazing meaning. Relish in the intense feelings the artist worked so hard to realize. It's impressive making someone feel dread, or anything really, but be unable to point at the source. Of course, Space Odyssey as a whole otherwise has a clear and great meaning and philosophy. Even this moment isn't perfectly meaningless, but it's no more than the protagonist goes insane from the vastness of the cosmos. This is pretty much the whole thesis of Lovecraft, man grasping his insignificance in the whole universe. Madness caused by a reality we all know of. By the way, when I say abstract, I mean it as one end of a spectrum. It doesn't have to be either completely abstract or profound. But there's a whole lot of difference between the 4D alien or the non-linear time and all the comprehending there, and something like man goes to space and goes insane because it's too insane, or man sees crazy monster that we can't describe in detail but we'll go on to describe in detail anyway before going crazy, or just the abstract nature of a more classic Lovecraftian movie like The Void. There's this extremely memorable moment in the movie In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter, wherein he does this more abstract approach very well. The horror here comes simply from pure and utter confusion and unbelievability. Otherwise, In the Mouth of Madness is a good movie that has one other specifically outstanding quality besides the great portrayal of madness. It's pretty much even purer cosmic horror than Annihilation because it has the madness part, and not only as a feature but also the main attraction, all the whilst not letting go of the existential dread or the fear of the unknown. It's definitely the most classic take on Lovecraft I've seen on the screen when it comes to the whole experience. The main character is skeptical about a supernatural event, in this case an author writing horror stories which make people go mad. Only the author suddenly disappears. He goes to investigate together with this girl, trying to find him. He sees unsettling and impossible things and meets the author, who's in a kind of pact with the cosmic beings that reveal to him the forbidden knowledge which he then has to put in his stories. What are the stories about? Well, the latest one is about a man and a woman who go to a secluded town and decide to stay at this old woman's place in a room from which you can see a black Byzantine church with golden... This is where the existential dread comes in. He's writing their stories. It's possible their life began at the very moment they got written into it. Their memories were implanted, much the same way we mentioned earlier. The guy starts completely losing it, and he then barely makes it out alive without the girl. When he tries to tell others, nobody believes him. They say the town he went to doesn't exist. He kills a random person with an axe like a madman, the same way another guy tried to kill him in the beginning of the movie. And so he gets thrown in a psychic ward, unable to prevent the world from being destroyed. The newest Mad book has already been submitted by him months ago. It's been published for 7 weeks now. On top of that, the woman they sent with him on the investigation doesn't exist. After everything has already gone to shit, he manages to get out, find the theater that's playing the movie adaptation of his life, which is literally the exact movie we're watching, go out of his way to get popcorn before sitting down, watching, and laughing. Yeah, this song is actually the theme of the movie, and it does work. It's like it's embracing the madness completely. This movie is really good at that. It's what I wish a lot of other Lovecraftian films were more like when it comes to the phenomena which confuse the protagonist so much they terrify him. Just add little things which on their own aren't that unsettling. I mean, paranormal seeming stuff happen to us all the time. People act strangely, you walk past a weird person at night, your eyes play tricks on you in the dark. But as it all starts to become a little too common to be a coincidence, but you still feel too paranoid if you call out one of the individual events, it gets very disturbing. The antagonist in this movie, the writer Sutter Kane, is in a way similar to H.P. Lovecraft's Nyarlathotep. He enjoys toying with our main character and driving him mad, perhaps other people as well, besides the madness induced by the books themselves. Nyarlathotep is fond of insanity as well. He is said to have 1,000 forms beyond comprehension, though a few of them are actually of slightly weird but otherwise ordinary humans. He masquerades as a person and leads his own cults, as he has no problem with living alongside humans. In this way, he is the most human-like of the Lovecraftian deities. Kane is similar, though he is likely human and simply commanded by the actual old gods. Nyarlathotep is my personal favorite from the Cthulhu mythos by a long shot, and he's luckily one that shouldn't be hard at all to adapt to film. He can take on multiple forms, which means he could be multiple characters, unbeknownst to the protagonist. Sutter Kane is a nice frame of reference as to how it can be done. There's still a lot more potential though, in my opinion. The possibilities of cruel and creative ways to drive a person mad are infinite, and the more elaborate and complicated the plan is, filled with initial misfortune, before redemption, before more misfortune, a whole roller coaster of emotions and madness, just the more Nyarlathotep will have fun, and the more the audience will enjoy the story. There's a huge opportunity for plot twists too. I think Nyarlathotep transforming into one of the more non-human forms would be really cool if they could manage to pull it off visually. It doesn't have to be insane, just alien enough, something like the clone in Annihilation. Him suddenly acting in a completely alien manner could hammer in the fact that he's perhaps nowhere close to a human in reality, if that's how you write him. He could just be mimicking. Continuing, a similar movie to In the Mouth of Madness is The Void. Both of these films could literally be put into Lovecraft's bibliography and they would blend right in. Now, I'm not going to spoil The Void, but the attempts they make at that classic Lovecraft culty confusion are incredibly bland. It could learn a lot from In the Mouth of Madness, I think. When it comes to these more standard Lovecraftian stories, unfortunately, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. When you're a Lovecraft virgin, the concept is really interesting and fresh, unlike anything you've seen before. But if not, unless it's either very good or pulls some sort of unique twist on it, it's just going to be boring. That's what makes movies like Annihilation really stand out. But enough with this cosmic horror crap for now. Let's talk about some other Lovecraft adaptations. How have the more classical horror stories of Lovecraft been portrayed in film so far? Like, for example, The Shadow over Innsmouth. The 2007 film Cthulhu is one of the oddest adaptations of Lovecraft. And yes, it is a loose adaptation of Innsmouth, not the Call of Cthulhu, which is the only story in which Cthulhu appears, in fact. In The Shadow over Innsmouth, our typical main character finds himself investigating a ruined and mysterious town. Its people all walk in odd ways and their faces are deformed in a fish-like manner. They're also not quite fond of outsiders. Many government officials have disappeared as soon as they started digging too deep. And the same happens with our protagonist. All the townsmen gather and go out on a hunt for him when he finds out that they've been worshipping Cthulhu and interbreeding with the Deep Ones, an ancient race of fish people. He evades them and almost manages to escape before they corner him near a railroad. Their skin is grey-green and their forms way more fish-like, with gills, unblinking eyes, webbed hands, and talking in unintelligible croak-like voices. The narrator passes out, but is surprisingly unharmed and alone when he wakes up. He returns to his town of Arkham and alerts the authorities, happy to have made it out alive. However, as he researches more into his ancestry, he realizes that he is part fishman and is slowly turning into one as well. He wishes to kill himself, but can't find the courage. Eventually, he suffers a mental breakdown and accepts it, and decides to break his brother out of a sanatorium, who is already further into the transformation than him. They will then finally venture into the underwater city of Ihanthley to live there with the other Deep Ones, forever. A major point of this story is the looming fear of alienation and realizing that you don't belong whatsoever in this place. And yet, Cthulhu 2007 is about a gay guy returning to his hometown after his mother's death, where a lot of people just hate him for being gay. The movie pulls off the same horrible atmosphere that Lovecraft portrayed in his story, only this time it's due to something Howard himself wouldn't have batted an eye at. Yes, he was homophobic too. The story is kind of a diss of Lovecraft, if anything, and yet it also does have the fish people plot. There are those interbreeding with the Deep Ones, but in this instance they only transform after they have a grandchild. This isn't explained, though it ties nicely into the gay plot, since the main character can't have a child and it's why his father hates him for it. So yeah, it's still literally The Shadow over Innsmouth, but with homophobic people as the source of alienating dread. It's a very creative idea and statement. The cinematography is great most of the time and the atmosphere was good. Now, the classic Innsmouth type plot on the other hand is not particularly well presented. There is never any build-up of mystery pertaining to whether anything's off with this town, since we confirm it the moment we arrive there, and there isn't much else about it. The main character is talked into staying in town for a couple extra days, instead of unable to leave because of the bus breaking down like in the original story. You can probably see how these plots contradict each other, the gay plot and the fish plot, let's call them. One is more dramatic, whilst the other is supposed to be scary. In my opinion, it would have been better if they had decided to make it all about the gay plot instead of sticking so much to the horror Innsmouth one. But there is a better Innsmouth adaptation, the 2001 movie Dagon. Now, the film has problems. It's mostly plagued by a bad main protagonist. The actor delivers a pretty bad performance, but I mean, the character himself is written terribly. He's supposed to be a nerdy guy and he repeats this phrase "there's still possibilities" like all the time. It's so annoyingly obvious that they try and work it into any scene they can, even an otherwise serious and good one. He talks in slang with a freaking 60-year-old homeless guy, and for some reason, pretty much everyone that doesn't speak English well or even at all in this weird town. He also has lines like this one.
Come on, motherfucker. I'm not a defenseless old man. You want this face? Come and get it! This is what it's like to die!
But what about the town itself? It's great. They went so overboard with the water and filth everywhere, and I love it. The town looks both like an abandoned village with its dilapidated, rundown nature, yet also bears the claustrophobic yet weirdly cozy and beautiful narrow streets of medieval towns. Its biggest houses resemble somewhat Gothic architecture, yet if you're standing near the water on the shore, it all looks like a creepy fishing town. And the townsmen, they're so creepy. There was one guy at the start where you could see he hadn't painted his neck white like the rest of his face, but that's it really. Everyone else looks perfect. And they were all so unique with their different faces and different bodies, just the costume design and makeup are great. And no matter how minor they were and whether they just appeared in the background for a second, they all moved in such a perfectly creepy manner. There was some bad CGI, but only 2 times if I recall correctly. Oh, and the sounds, god the sounds, I've never heard anything like them, the croaking and hissing. Even their voices sounded like they had phlegm in their throat. Speaking of that, the old guy getting his neck slashed and still continuing to talk was quite unrealistic. That doesn't really happen. I guess Funky Town wasn't there for reference back in 2001, although they did skin his face much like Funky Town. Please don't look it up, it's really disturbing. Oh, and they cut the main character's neck a little too, but he just shrugs it off, I guess. And it's not just that, he constantly gets away with so much, so by the end it isn't even scary, because you know he won't die before the last 5 minutes. Yes, I know every horror movie is like this, but you really aren't helping much with the suspension of disbelief when he escapes just barely from the scary but slow as hell fish people at the last second, like literally 10 times. Come on. But hey, it's still a great portrayal of Innsmouth with great atmosphere. Of course, there are other good and bad adaptations of similar Lovecraftian stories. Stuart Gordon and Dennis Paoli were the ones who made Dagon, but they also adapted Herbert West's Reanimator for 3 separate movies, and also the story From Beyond. I've only watched the first Reanimator film so far, but it was pretty good, better than I expected for sure. From Beyond, on the other hand, might just be the worst movie I've ever seen. I'm not kidding, you choose what to watch, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. However, let's return to cosmic horror. What did we learn after taking a look at all these movies? Well, cosmic horror is not about showing incomprehensible monsters. It's about making you consider incomprehensible or unknown ideas or phenomena, one of which could happen to be a being. You can do whatever you want with your story, but I personally prefer the examples I laid out in this video over the simple, try your best to explain an impossible to grasp figure in a book and hope it's enough. I like Lovecraft, but when reading his stories, that one meme that says Lovecraft protagonists looking at a giant octopus and going insane because it's big can start ringing a little true. But if you still want the physical being or the object to be either the so incomprehensible thing or the part of the larger idea, how do you do it in film? In Annihilation, we still don't know the true form of the alien due to the utilization of the fourth dimension. John Carpenter, on the other hand, has a different way of concealing the identity, which we explained earlier, and so does Stanley Kubrick with whatever it was that David saw in Space Odyssey. We can also show just the reactions and nothing of the being itself, like in the beginning of Arrival, when they're staring at the TV. Or the movie The Bird Box, which is terrible in many ways, but it did the concealing part pretty well. Of course, they still could have went way more extreme with it, which I would have liked, and also varied the reactions a little so it doesn't get stale by the end. The exact same could be said about the characters killing themselves immediately, which was still a very cool idea. In the Mouth of Madness also doesn't show them and even pulls off quite the cool trick, where the girl is reading from the book what he's seeing at that moment, but we can't see it, so it is literally like a book. Of course, they didn't use it to the best of their ability and instead went on to show the monsters afterwards anyway. When it comes to seeing the beings, I think it would definitely be better if you got the audience to trust the characters first, to spend at least half the movie with them, proving them as a reliable narrator, and not leave them feeling like a device to avoid showing the alien with. perhaps we can have a breaking of the fourth wall, wherein the alien just cannot exist on the tape and it gets cut from the movie. If you don't want the fourth wall part, make it a found footage film. You can also do it so the lightning literally reveals the being for a fraction of a second and not its whole form at one time, thus you can't really make it out. You can have multiple characters witness the being, but they all describe it differently. Maybe one makes an off comment about a random thing like how much time has passed or something along those lines, and the others disagree. I'm probably imagining it way too cool and it won't look as good in most cases, but it for sure sounds terrifying. That's just one idea about the going insane part. There are so many cool and creepy scenarios like that which you can think up if you really put your mind to it. But what are movies better at? Now, I love books. I think finding a book that you really love, like a true 10 out of 10, is in some ways for me better than 10 out of 10 games or movies. But just think about for a second why books are better than visual mediums at cosmic horror. Well, they can just avoid the visual aspect of the alien easier. Movies can still do it, and in many ways, when they do pull it off, it's way more impressive, because you don't expect them to. It's much the same as incomprehensible ideas. And what about portraying the distortion of space? Yes, I know movies cannot go as far as books, but they can also actually show it. Books can say literally anything, but if it's so hard to imagine, it can feel like way too made up for some people. Like we said with Lovecraft's depictions of the impossible. You can say it's just too incomprehensible and that's it, and so I won't even try imagining it. This isn't even a movie, just a random video on YouTube, yet it shows how confusing visuals can be. And we can play around with cuts as well to really confuse the audience. You can also still show indescribable forms on film, like actually indescribable. I doubt many of you could formulate what computer-generated pictures such as this one look like. And yes, these do work with videos quite well too. I would be very interested to see how something like this could work in an actual film. And what about the simpler Lovecraftian creatures, the more comprehensible ones such as Cthulhu? He is the most popular after all. By this point you've probably realized that any action movie take on it would completely ruin everything. So how do you do it? What do you think it looks like from an insect's POV when you go to the store and back? Just an ordinary activity you don't pay much attention to. You probably step on a dozen ants, all the while not even realizing they are there. That's how I'd like Cthulhu to be. Cosmic horror as a whole is an intimidating genre to tackle in film, if for no other reason due to the fact that you'll simply have a bigger chance of making your money back if you do standard horror. But that's exactly the thing. Lovecraftian horror in movies hasn't been explored fully yet, we don't even know its potential. And that's unfortunate because cosmic horror is a type of horror that truly sticks with you. I think this video has probably made it pretty apparent just how much I like Lovecraftian stuff. Hell, I even have a Cthulhu poster on my wall. But I'll be honest, if I didn't love the philosophy of cosmicism, his stories won't be that good of a read. His prose is definitely very unique and makes me feel smart, but reading it for extended periods of time just isn't that fun. I guess that's why he wrote short stories mostly, but even they can start getting exhausting if they're a little longer. He still invented cosmic horror though. He is an okay, maybe good writer that inspired many other better artists who, despite their skills, likely wouldn't have had the horrible imagination this guy did. I truly think that at least Annihilation, The Thing and that one moment in Space Odyssey do it better than the man himself. But nonetheless, in my time of reading Lovecraft's works and consuming other media inspired by him, the idea of meeting an alien has truly become one of my biggest fears and interests. Aliens could possibly be, much like in Annihilation, murderous and destructive. Not because they are evil, but because they cannot ever even remotely understand us. Just like them, we might as well do something without much thought that completely terrifies them. Or they may also be similar to the heptapods, also arguably terrifying, but a little more similar to us and with not bad intentions. Yet even still, I do kind of wish that the existence of life is just some ridiculously rare accident, spawned by a billion specific things that somehow all happened in the same proximity and made it possible. If the universe is infinite or even half as large as we believe it to be right now, then it has happened somewhere else. But the rarer it is, the lesser the chance that it's close to us, both in time and space. Sure, aliens could be cool, but nonetheless there are some things that we are better off not knowing. Finally, here are all the movies mentioned in this video that I didn't rate, and the book. I'm sure at least one person out there wants to know, right? Keep in mind that I watched a lot of these movies in a short span of time as I'm making this video, so it's entirely possible that my ratings change in the future. Hey, thank you for watching this existential dread-inducing video about my brief mentioning of psychedelics. If you're planning to take any whatever drug, please just take the time to do your research and always test your substances. It's super cheap and safe. You only have one life, be it ultimately meaningful or not. Even if you survive, why not make sure you're actually taking what you want? Anyway, this video took pretty long to make since I had to watch so many movies. Sure, I can cram 3 in a day pretty easily, but at one point I'm not even digesting them properly. There are many I didn't mention in this video, and I'd only watched a few already before I started writing this. I also had to reread a bunch of Lovecraft stories, of course. Finally, make sure to ring the bell, share, like, comment, watch my other videos and all of that. Check out my waiting list if you're interested. It's where I score and write down my brief thoughts on anything and everything that I watch, play and so on. I also keep all my video ideas and what I'm currently working on there. It's linked on my channel. And as always, subscribe if you like this type of content and want to see more of it. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video.